6:15. Roxanne, would you call the meeting, call the public hearing notice? Read the call of the public hearing.
The Ledyard Town Council will conduct a virtual video conference public hearing on Wednesday, March the 10th, 2021 at 6:15 p.m. to receive comments and recommendations regarding a proposed an ordinance providing for a property tax exemption for farm buildings in the town of Ledyard. Interested persons may submit written communications to towncouncil@ledyardct.org. Please join the meeting from your computer, tablet, or smartphone. The remote meeting participation information for the video conference and draft ordinance will be available on the town's website at www.ledyardct.org, located under the Agenda and Minutes tab. This was dated at Ledyard, Connecticut on the 25th day of February, 2021. For the Ledyard Town Council, Linda C. Davis, Chairman.
Thank you. At this time, this has been through 3 committees, so I'm going to ask, since it originated in land use, I believe, I'm going to ask Kevin to start with a brief presentation. And then if either Mary, as far as admin, or Bill with finance want to weigh in, please feel free to do that. But we'll start with Kevin right now.
Hey, thank you, Linda. Good evening, everyone. This ordinance comes out of the Connecticut General Statute, which currently allows for tax exemption of up to $100,000 on farm vehicles. But the state statute also allows that individual municipalities can add an additional exemption for buildings and farm equipment as well. The town has decided to propose an ordinance that would allow up to $100,000 exemption on farm buildings, which this ordinance covers, and what buildings would be covered and things like that. And that it's a renewable application. There is a limit in accordance with the state statute of the income that the farm has to make in order to show that they are an operating farm. That's really the basics of what this is all about, allowing farming activities to have an additional tax abatement or a tax exemption on buildings on the property that are being used for farming.
Thank you, Kevin. I know that admin and finance dealt with this. Do either of the chair have anything to add?
No, he captured it all.
Thanks, Mary. Bill, anything?
Yeah, he got it all. Good summary, Kevin.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I will open it up to any public comments.
This is Eric Treaster.
Address?
10 Huntington Way. I submitted a written entry into the record. I was wondering if anyone or everyone has read it.
I have read it, yes.
Yep.
Yes, I have read it.
I read it also.
My concerns are a mixture of technical concerns and policy concerns. The biggest technical concern is that, in my opinion, paragraph 3.1, which is intended to reflect what's in the statute, does not quite do it. The statute provides an option for housing used by farm employees to be considered one of the buildings that gets up to $100,000 exempt tax exemption, but as an option. But the way that is reflected in the ordinance, it states that it is required, and that is not what the statute says. As a result of that misinterpretation of the statute, the next paragraphs excludes housing for farm employees, which is fine, but it's a conflict, and it makes the ordinance difficult to understand, where in one sentence it says it shall include a tax exemption for farm housing, and then a few sentences later it says it shall not. So I don't like to see what appears to be a direct conflict, and I've suggested a change that would remove that conflict, which corrects the interpretation of the statute. I tried to be as precise as I could on that deficiency. So that's probably the most important thing that I believe is a mistake in the proposed ordinance. And it's basically just simply a misinterpretation of the statute. The other one has to do with policy. And I was just curious if there have been a significant number of farmers who have requested the tax exemption, or what is the history of why we are doing this? I'm just curious. I'm not aware of any need for it. The exemption it translates into a relatively small amount of money, and unless somebody has a large number of buildings, because the exemption is based as a function of the number of buildings and not necessarily the value of the buildings. For example, if you have a $300,000 building, you get a $100,000 exemption, but if you have three $100,000 buildings, you get three $100,000 exemptions. So there's some issues of fundamental fairness, in my opinion. I don't see a need for the ordinance, but it may exist. I just might not be aware of it. And its administration will take some hours. That there will be a small cost to administer the ordinance. So I think when all is said and done, I think I'm opposed to the ordinance, both from a technical viewpoint because it has a big mistake in it, and also because as a policy matter, I don't think is appropriate to offer certain occupations benefits that other occupations who might need it more do not get. So that's my concern. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Mike Cherry, 5 Whippoorwill Drive in Gales Ferry. And I find myself in the not too often occurrence of being half in agreement with Eric. I have no comments on the technical issues of the ordinance. I feel admin and land use, everybody's done a wonderful job on the technical aspects. I'm concerned with the need for the ordinance. And my reference is, we looked at this pretty long and hard when we redid the zoning regs. And so I'm looking at planning for agriculture and then Public Act 490. In the planning for agriculture publication from Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, it talks about local tax reduction programs. And in there, probably the biggest tax reduction for agriculture is PA 490, which taxes farmland by its use, not by its market value. In 2017, we had some spreadsheets run looking at what was farmland, what should we do. And when you look, the tax rates on farmland statewide by use, tillable A, which is the highest classification, is taxed at $1,880 an acre as of last year. Compare that to what your home lot may be taxed at. So there's significant tax advantage there just from PA 490. The second one is farm equipment, animals, and other property. By state statute, tools, machinery up to $100,000 in farm products are exempt from property taxes. So they got a second one. So we're looking at the third one now for farm buildings, and a spreadsheet built by the assessor, I believe, Adriana. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think probably from the same time frame, 2017, 2018. When you looked at assessed values, the assessed values looked at out of that sheet about $800,000 worth of buildings and a potential tax loss of up to $28,000 based on the farms that had buildings assessed over 100,000. Machinery was a very small loss, but machinery's covered. We decided not to go with the additional machinery one. So I just question, at a time where everybody's suffering from job loss due to COVID, at a time when Our budget season shows us with a revenue problem, not an expense problem. We've pared expenses about the best we can, where a lot of homeowners are going to see tax increases. And we just trimmed the optional tax exemption for seniors, adding a tax exemption with limited use to a group that already has significant tax advantages may not be appropriate. I looked at a couple communities that had more agriculture than Ledyard. I compared us to Preston, North Stonington. I said, okay, what's the same, what's different? Well, we're both in the 30 to 50 square mile range. Our population at 15,000 gives us a population density of about 380 per square mile. Preston has a population of 4,700 in about the same area for a density of 150 per square mile. They're much more rural and much more agriculture based. And I would say that as you start moving more towards suburban, the services are required. If you're more rural like Preston, you can get by with fewer services, and therefore, even though your grand list is smaller, your service bill is much less too. So I'm not too sure it's the right time for Ledyard based on population density, things that we've already decided weren't good for Ledyard, and the fact that this population already has significant tax advantages. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cherry. Does anyone else from the public wish to speak at this time? Hearing none. Adriana, did you have any comments? I know you can't speak, but did any counselors have any comments? Mr. Solms?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I would like to address both residents' comments in the area of whether this amendment or this ordinance was requested and basically why. Answer to the first question is yes, it was requested by several of the farmers in town, and to the point of the population density and services. The Ledyard was a farming community to a small extent. It still is, and I personally believe that is part of our quality of life, and more important.
Whoops, you're muted. You went off, Bill.
Sorry, I knew that. From the perspective of services, farmland demands less from the community in terms of services and from the taxpayers than residential housing. So part of our goal is to preserve farmland. And if we can help a farmer stay in business, I think that's an investment. It's not a fairness issue. It's a matter of what makes economic sense for the community, and can we preserve both the quality of life that we see today, what's left of the farmland community, and also can we preserve the farmland because it costs less to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Solms. Mrs. McGrattan.
We have just appointed, and they have just started, an agricultural commission. There's also another ad hoc committee to look at agriculture and zoning. I don't think this is a good time to pull away from this ordinance. I think we really need to support our farmers and farmland, and it is not that expensive.
I would concur with Mrs. McGrattan. I thought initially when the question was asked why, the simple answer was in support of our agricultural community. And to me, it's as basic as that. Are there any other comments? Any questions for Adriana? She is able to speak now.
I did have one point to bring up,
Yes.
Madam Chairman.
Yes.
There's a certain stipulation that they have to either expend or receive at least $15,000 in their farming venture each year to qualify for this. So this isn't something that's going to be for farmers that perhaps lease their land out to be hayed or things like that. These need to be viable businesses in order to qualify for this.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other comments from,
And,
Yes.
and that is, the ordinance does state that.
yes. Thank you. Mr. Dombrowski.
Yeah, my only concern with this ordinance, I'm fully in favor of supporting our farming communities. But one of the concerns I have is that we recently did away or revised an ordinance that took away tax exemptions and some for other citizens. And it looks kind of funny that we're now giving a tax exemption to a different section of the community after we took it away from somebody else.
Thank you for that comment. Anyone else have any comments? Hearing none, I would call this public hearing adjourned, and we will see many of you at 7 o'clock.
Is this on the agenda for the regular meeting this evening?
It is not.
Thank you.
I'm waving goodbye.